everyone, and welcome to our Healthy Living segment with Denise Stegall. Hello, Denise.
Hey Jean, how you doing today?
I am good. Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Life is good.
Denise is our longevity specialist, and this month we're talking about the importance of self-care and reaching your personal goals. So, Denise, tell us about that. Why does it make a difference?
So it is so important that we look at self-care from a different perspective because self-care can truly be the change that we need to help us reach our personal goals. And of course, we've got personal goals, we've got professional goals, but today I'd like to really focus more on those personal goals. And if you think of it like a building, like when you're building a skyscraper or even just building a house, you need to have a strong foundation. When we built our house, when they put the footings in, the house looked huge because the footings needed to be a certain way to be able to hold the house, for it to be able to stand tall and not fall over. And so essentially achieving your personal goals kind of requires that same type of foundation. And I think of that foundation as self-care.
Hmm.
So that being said, what does that actually mean? That foundation is simple. It's things that we talk about all the time. Prioritizing your sleep, nourishing your body with whole foods that actually, support your body. And then doing activities that actually recharge our body, mind, and spirit. And these are things that helps us to really perform at our best when we're looking at personal goals, whether it's a weight loss goal or maybe you want to run a half a marathon or a marathon. Like those are the type of personal goals that that I'm really thinking about. And it also helps us when it gets tough, because whatever the personal goal that you're reaching, maybe something that I started recently, or started back on recently, is a program that I started a couple of years ago that I never got to finish. Well, I have a good foundation now, and truly, when I first started, I don't think that I did. Didn't have enough of that foundation. So now I can start that program again, and when things get tough, when it gets difficult, I actually have a greater sense of clarity why I'm doing it, why it's important, and resilience. So now that I can see this in a different light, because I am taking much better care of myself, specifically when it comes to sleep, than when I initially started the.
That makes sense because I didn't really think about it, but it does make sense because when I started, after this hip surgery event, and I'm week 7, and what I'm doing now in my mind, it is actually that foundation thought process. But I didn't even consider that because I needed something to build on so that I can do other things when it's time to just, oh, I'd like to go for a hike and not have to go, well, can't go for a hike because I need to recondition. So that is really very true.
Yes. And like in your situation, you had something happened that you had to recreate this foundation. But for so many people, there's no event that has,
Mm-hmm.
that causes them to go, oh, I need to do this. Um, Except at some point, burnout. That's usually when somebody goes, you know what, I need to reestablish, kind of, whether it's reestablishing boundaries or reestablishing what that self-care means to them. That's usually when most people go, you know what, I need to make changes. And it really is self-care, our lack of self-care leads to burnout personally, professionally, in relationships, and completely can derail any progress you make in those in the different strides to get where you want to go.
So, what are some of the tips that you have for creating that foundation or creating that or recognize? Well, first of all, let me ask the question differently. So, what are some of the areas where you recognize that you really do need to have a better self-care process? And then, what are the tips for creating that foundation?
Sure. One of the things that I when I'm working with people that we notice, and they eventually notice as we're talking, as we're working together, it's that they're constantly pushing, and not actually taking that time to rest, recharge, recuperate. And that takes a toll mentally and physically. And again, that's kind of where motivation seems to wane, and our desire for reaching those goals really can wane and kind of leave us in a place where we're kind of going, now what? So when you realize that you're always pushing, constantly going, and I'm an overachiever in lots of things. Overachiever, that's my mother's word. If I want to do something, I go 110%. Well, some days going 110% is fine, but doing it 110% every day, every week, every month, there is, body breaks down emotionally and mentally. There's just not enough capacity. So when you feel exhausted, that is really a time, hopefully before you get exhausted, but when you get to that point, that's a time to step back and go, ooh, you know what? I really need to make some change. In the interim, for people who are going, oh yeah, I do tend to, burn the candle at both ends. This is a time right now to recognize that and to start prioritizing your sleep, your relaxation. Sleep and relaxation don't necessarily mean the same thing. And so for me, that's number one. Once you notice that, it's what is, then looking at your schedule. Why are you pushing so hard? Is there a deadline? Is it a set deadline, or is it something you can, slowly move? Obviously with goals, we want them to be timely, but we also have control of the timeline, right?
Realistic.
Absolutely. With sustaining or creating a pace. So once you realize that, that you're pushing too much, or you're doing that 110%, it's really important to step back and really figure out what is a sustainable pace to reach that. Again, this works with that timely, reasonable time frame to accomplish a goal. And sometimes, honestly, you just need to take a break. Like I did with this course, it was intense. I had just finished a different course, and I just could not get my brain really around it. And so that was important. Sometimes you do just need to take a break, whether it's 15 minutes, a week, in my case, a couple of years. I knew it was something that I would get back to, but it also, this is really important, it wasn't a priority. And so that's another piece of this self-care, is what are the things that are actually a priority in reaching those goals? Because sometimes we set a goal, we're like, it's a laudable goal. But if it's really not that important, urgent, then it's okay to step back. So again, I think the self-care piece that I think is really important is slowing down, getting your rest, and really focusing on what it is that you want to accomplish, why, and then kind of come up with a time frame.
I like that. So some of the points that you've mentioned that for me, I don't know that self-care is such an overused word or term, right? And so self-care can be, well, you haven't mentioned one thing I expected you to mention that you always mention is eat real foods.
Absolutely.
But that is part of the self-care that should be obvious without having to identify or define. But some of the things that you mentioned aren't necessarily things that I would have put into a self-care category, but they're really important. And you had said, just as a to circle it back, or for everybody, you had said sleep and the importance of sleep. And you've talked about that in the past with circadian rhythm as well. So you said sleep and your relaxation. That's never in a self-care topic, how important that is. and managing your schedule management, and looking at your deadlines and prioritizing your goals and your activities, and making sure that they're realistic and sustainable. Zero to hero every day doesn't work.
Absolutely. And you make a point, you're a hero of your own story, right? In your own life.
Yeah.
So, but the hero, the hero sometimes takes breaks too. He needs to eat, he needs to sleep, or she needs to eat, she needs to sleep. And if you're watching, a heroic TV program, guess what? What happens between like episodes? They relax, or they take their breaks. I don't know. I've got superheroes in my head all of a sudden.
Well, thanks, Denise. These are super great tips, but also easy to wrap your head around and easy to implement. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. This is Jean Gallagher, Discover Rising Tides, and I want to just take a moment to talk about my friend, Denise Stegall. I am honored to call her as a friend, and I'm so grateful that she gives us her insight during our shows, each show, and talks about healthy living, eating real food. You hear Denise say, eat real food a lot. Well, she means it, and she knows what she's talking about. She is an amazing healthy living coach, curator at Living Healthy List. And if you ever have any questions about what is real food, why does it matter? How does that apply to me? How do I change? What do I need to do? How do I even create a healthy living shopping list? Make sure that you call her. She is your healthy living coach, and you can find her at healthylivinglist.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Discover Rising Tides, How the Outside Makes the Inside Better. My name is Jean Gallagher, and I'm excited to be here with this week's guest, Courtney Farr. Hi, Courtney. How are you?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I sure can. Thanks. So, Courtney, before we get started, give us a little bit of a background, a little bit of your background and your bio, and then we can get started.
Okay, great. So my name is Courtney Farr. I'm a family practice nurse practitioner. I came, I'm from this area, from San Luis Obispo area. I grew up in Templeton when I was a little girl, and I founded a company called JHouse Calls Mobile, which is a virtual doctor's visit. And I invented the virtual stethoscope, which plugs into your smartphone or tablet, like a regular stethoscope, and otoscope, that is the doctor's tool that looks in your ears, so you can have a complete virtual physical exam. I kind of created that out of I noticed that there was a need living in a rural area for better access to medical care. And, I can tell you a little bit more about that later, about how my mom was sick with cancer, and we didn't really have access to medical care when I was a little girl. So I felt like that was a real something that really needed to be done.
Well, let's talk about that. So how did that affect you, or how did that affect your mom when you were living rurally?
Yeah, so when I was a little girl, my parents, we lived in a town called Templeton, which has about 800 people in it when I was a little girl, and there was just one stoplight in town, and just my dad was a school teacher, and there's only about 800 people in town, so there wasn't really any work for available for him as a school teacher. So he started doing odd jobs, digging trenches with his backhoe. And we were kind of having difficulty making ends meet with his side jobs. And so my mom found a lump in her breast, and she called her mom, who lived in Ohio, and she said, I have a lump in my breast. And her mom said, oh, it's nothing. I have one there too. So she ignored it. They actually both ended up having breast cancer.
Wow.
And my mom delayed a little bit too long, so that when they ended up discovering it, it was kind of too late. And it was back in the 80s, when there wasn't a lot of medicine, wasn't as advanced for breast cancer care either. and so, but she ended up having it for about 13 years. And towards the end, I ended up being her caregiver when I was about 15 when she passed away. And so that kind of drove me to want to become a nurse. And so I went ahead and had kept my grades up and ended up putting myself through community college, and then later we transferred to USC on full scholarship and got my bachelor's in nursing. And then later, I had always wanted to be a nurse practitioner, and so I ended up getting a full scholarship to Yale University, and I ended up getting my master's in nursing. And so then after I graduated, I worked in an underserved area for a while in Washington, D.C., and really felt like, again, access to care was a really big difficulty. Not everybody was able to get access to medical care. In urban areas too, low income part of the urban area, again, people delay because they can't afford medical care, and they delay going to see their doctor when they have a problem, and they end up waiting too long, and ends up becoming a bigger problem. And so that's when I kind of felt like there was a need for better access to medical care. And then I thought, well, everyone has a phone. Everyone, they might not have a home or a roof over the head, but everyone has a phone. And even when I would volunteer in third world countries, everyone has a phone. And so I thought, well, gee, and this was pre-pandemic. Why can't we just create a medical visit through your phone with a virtual medical exam? So the only issue I found, so when I was in school, they told you that 90% of diagnosis is through the interview process with your patient, and you can get another 10 to 20% from exam and tests. And so I was like, well, we just need that last little bit to really make an effective virtual visit. And so that's when I went to starting to invent the virtual stethoscope and otoscope.
Amazing. So first off, that's a lot of responsibility for a 15-year-old.
Yeah, it was. We ended up actually homeschooling for a while as well. My sister was 13, I was 15 when my mom passed, but because we were her 24-hour caregivers. So
wow.
So we ended up my dad being, a school teacher, he felt like he could help
definitely
with our
with the
education
homeschooling part. Yeah.
And
your mom was so fortunate to have you both.
Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate to have her too for as long as we did. It's sometimes it's difficult losing a parent young, but at least I got to know her until I was a teenager. So and I kind of almost feel like maybe a little bit of the whole survivor's complex thing too, where you feel like you want to make a difference because she died so young. She died at 48, and so you kind of, I don't know, maybe there's some of that too, where I feel like I needed to make her death not and create something from that.
Sure. No, definitely. And that's quite a motivator too. And for you to continue on into the medical field, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would be being in that situation at 15 would decide that medicine was not where they wanted to be.
Yeah.
So good. I can understand your passion for this. And, medicine has changed a lot since the 80s, but still that early detection is so important.
Yeah. And that's with a lot of diseases. And now I work full-time as a nurse practitioner for veterans as well at the VA. And and I still, and we do a lot of telemedicine at the VA too. And so I really feel like it's the future of healthcare, where people can kind of be at home and even like this interview, it's a whole lot easier to do it remotely than for me to drive up to where you're at.
Exactly. Though I do need an excuse to come down to you. We were supposed to come down to your area this month, and it great plans fell apart. But anyways, so telemedicine is amazing. My naturopath is, I see her through telemed, and it's easy to make an appointment. And I find too that the appointments are less rushed. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, I do. Especially when I'm doing with my veterans at the VA. I feel like there is a bulk of the face-to-face visits where we're kind of wasting time on taking their vital signs and doing all those things. Not that the vital signs are important, but they can do it beforehand, and give us those numbers. We don't have to waste the doctor's visit with a lot of that stuff. All that stuff can really be done before a video visit, and you can, tell me what's your blood pressure today. Okay, what's your pulse? Great. I don't need to spend 15 minutes having you get all that done. Hey, what's your weight today? That all that stuff is really, really not relevant to the visit. And so that all makes people rush through the visit. And now I have some pretty old veterans too, in their hundreds, and that's making them rush around. Whereas I can do a telemedicine with those same veterans and their families, and they're just comfortable in their home, and they're able to share more with me too. I feel like because they're not so rushed, they're able to tell me, be more relaxed and tell me things that maybe they wouldn't have said in the office.
Or remembered.
Exactly. Or remembered. I
don't want to compare it to going to the grocery store, but if you're at home and you think about, just to simplify the concept a little bit, and you think about, oh, these are all the things I need. I don't need a list. The moment that you leave the house and you walk into the grocery store, maybe I'm just talking about myself, but it all goes away, right?
True.
And I find that the same thing happens when I have to go physically see the doctor. Yes, I do write things down, but inevitably, because it is getting there, and then you're sitting around waiting to get in, and then you only, in quotes, only have 15 minutes with this person. And there's some, you have to have a little bit of intro conversation, right? To make everybody feel comfortable, but the clock is ticking. And there's always something that's missed. But being home, when I talk to my naturopath on the phone, I'm here. Like you said, I didn't have that rush getting in, and I have the ability to, my list is better, and her list is better too. The conversation is more on point.
Exactly. That's the way I feel too, is I'm able to kind of think about the patient's problem a little bit better, actually, because I'm also not being rushed. I'm not thinking about the patient next, and if I'm running behind or not. And so I'm able to really take the time and really think through the problem, think about, how I can, what kind of solutions we can come up with. And it's a whole lot more relaxed too. I feel like it becomes more productive. I mean, you can do pros and cons to everything. But I kind of feel like there's going to be this modified doctor's visit where people come in for shots, or they come in for something if they need to actually do an exam. But I don't know. I think that this is the start of a change in the healthcare field.
There are some things that you can't do over the phone.
There's a lot of things you can't do over the phone.
However, I think you're breaking down some barriers. So tell us, how does this house call mobile work?
So it's been a real process, actually. I feel like when I kind of set out to create this, I thought it was going to be a lot easier than it has been. There's been a lot more obstacles than I had ever imagined. For example, I mean, this is a medical device, so I have to get it FDA approved.
Right.
And with that comes a lot of tests that have to be done. Also, just the whole R&D process. Making a device that's functional. It's not it's not as easy as it sounds. There's been we had to create a high and low frequency filter on the stethoscope so that any noises that we get from your clothing is reduced, and we can just get the hard sounds and the long sounds. And so I ended up hiring an engineer who's actually in Pakistan, and we've been doing all of our R&D, just also because, I mean, he has a PhD in electrical engineering. He's super smart, but somebody I couldn't afford here in the States, to be honest with you, just because I had looked at people like him in the States, and it's just, I mean, it was like hiring a lawyer. They were really, really expensive. So he's really talented, and so we've been working together on that process. And then I've had to hire an app developer to create the app. We're still working out some of the kinks on the app, but we have an app for the Apple device, JHouse Calls Mobile, and then we have working on the Android version of it.
So how does it work? So a couple of the questions are in my head. How does the device itself work, and how does the device get to the patients?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we mail the device to the patients. It's, again, so we're still in the R&D process. So we don't actually we have a wait list right now, but we're not actually selling them yet to patients. But basically, mail one to the patient. They can either buy it, or it can be part of a subscription plan if they join like a telemedicine subscription. And then it goes for about $65 a unit. So we're trying to keep it reasonable for medical device.
So it's really accessible.
Yeah, that's been a really important thing for me, to make sure it's accessible, so that it's not just for certain people. And then so then we mail it to the patient, and then the patient will book a visit, just like you would book an Uber ride. And so they can book it through the app or the computer, or the website.
I just booked a meeting with my doctor on the app today. It's so convenient.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you basically you have your scheduled appointment, kind of like you and I scheduled our Zoom appointment for this. You just click on the link when it's time for your visit, and then we just tell them what's going on. My baby's got an earache, or I've got toothache, or I've got some sinus congestion, or whatever. I have some back pain, and then especially if it's some kind of upper respiratory kind of condition, we can listen to the heart and lungs and look in the ear with the otoscope, look in your baby's ears. A lot of parents sometimes don't want to take their crying baby, to the doctor's office, spend half the day there, so they look in their ears. And so we can,
So let's run down what it can do. This is really fascinating. So it can look in your ears, and it has a stethoscope, so it can listen to your heart or your lungs.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, your mouth too, your throat. And, but so those are its capabilities.
That's amazing. And just think about the lack of germs in the doctor's office too. If you're sick and you're coughing, or your baby's coughing, and the last thing you want to do is to bring that sick child to the doctor's office, but also expose that sick child to other sick people in the doctor's office too. Yeah,
exactly. And you could do that before you go to work and see whether or not your baby has an ear infection. You can pick up that antibiotic, on your way out the door. And nowadays, I think you can even have that stuff delivered.
That's true. That's true. So this is really fascinating, and I commend you for working through the trouble and doing the hard work of getting this done.
And I feel like, and when I start getting frustrated with everything, I remind myself that I feel like it's really going to be an important thing for a lot of people, and it's very important for me to try to keep the cost down and doing all the R&D on my own, rather than once you get big companies involved, it starts getting to become big price tag. R&D costs, they put that money onto the device, and then it'll end up becoming more and more expensive for the consumer. I don't want that. I don't want another $300 stethoscope out there. That's not helping anybody. Nobody's going to be able to afford that. But on average, we've done a lot of surveys, and $65 seems to be an affordable option for people.
And how are you imagining it being used? Obviously, what we're talking about is somebody at home and having the device and having an interaction with their doctor. But you also mentioned low income. Is there other applications that you're considering for this?
Yeah. So I mean, when I kind of first conceptualized this, I always thought, hey, we could drop these into disaster areas. Those crates like that FEMA sends out when there's hurricanes and things like that. Again, reporters and the comm is up during those disasters, but sometimes people just don't have access to medical care. So you might not be able to get the doctors in there, but you can get some medical devices in there and some iPads, and you can do some remote visits with patients, even though maybe the doctor's in New York or somewhere else. They can do a FEMA, disaster triage remotely.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and the same thing with any developing country. Again, the post office, you can mail things just about anywhere. So you can end up sending it who knows where, for people to get. My app developers in India, like I said, my stethoscope developers in Pakistan, both of them feel real passion for that because the communities they live in, they see it every day, and all the people in those communities could use better access to care, medical care. Quality medical care, not just your country veterinarian is looking at you,
So what a wonderful way to honor your mom.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying, and I keep that in the back of my head too. Is I'm just again, it's real easy to get complacent and just be like, whatever, I don't have to do this. It takes a lot of time and money out of my own life, and but at the end of the day, it keeps pushing me forward is because I want to create something for her and in her remembrance, and that's what's driven me all these years, getting myself through those schools, and so we didn't have any money for school, so I had to put myself through. So I remind myself that, and I feel
you didn't go small either.
No, yeah, I didn't.
Well, only just Yale, no big deal.
Yeah, somehow got there. Yeah, and I mean, there's a bit of a kind of also feeling like I need to pay back for those opportunities that I was given as well. That not everybody gets, and I appreciate that I was given that opportunity. But I also feel like I have a commitment to do something for the community because of it.
That's fantastic. And so you're working with veterans, and then you're also working as a nurse practitioner outside of the VA as well, too, correct?
Which is the JHouse Calls Mobile. Yeah, that's
okay. Perfect.
Yeah, so I can do virtual visits through that as well. But my full-time job, I work at the VA.
Is at the VA.
Yeah.
And so how do you, with everything that's going on, your full-time job and then managing this project, how do you take care of Courtney?
Yeah. So my husband and I, we love to travel. We love to explore. I really feel like you learn more about the world around you if you go and see it. Leave your couch and see what's going on. And I love volunteering in other countries, and I've volunteered Thailand and Africa, and the hill tribes villages of Thailand. When I was actually a student nurse, we went there during a public health about 10 of us went there,
Mhm.
and we provided medical care to the refugees by the Burmese border. In this, it was a school for girls that were being rescued from the prostitution trade, because
Wow.
their parents couldn't afford them, so they were selling them to prostitution trade. So instead, there was this lady that would save the girls and bring them to this school and educate them. And then when we went, we were a bunch of nurses there. People were coming from like walking for 10 hours with their babies with fevers and just to get medical care, because again, had no access to medical care. And so we just give them simple things like Tylenol, and ended up saving those babies' lives, bringing their temperatures down. Just because
Amazing.
those just basic, cooling techniques, he had already lost, I think, one or two other children from that same fever, because
Wow.
they tend to swaddle their children when they're sick, and that was the wrong thing to do because the fever just kept going up. So
Especially in a really warm climate like that.
yeah. And so then fast forward 10 years, and I came back as a nurse practitioner with some of the same people, and they had started a whole little clinic in that because of us, and a lot of like Peace Corps people had helped develop this little clinic inside the school, inside the girls' school, and volunteers had been manning it. And so we came back, and then we were, providing them medical care in the little clinic up there in the Hill Tribe villages. And yeah, and it really made me realize how just one simple thing, one small thing, us going there for like a week when we were nursing students, changed the whole trajectory. And those girls that we met back then, they became nurses. Like 3 of them
Wow.
went to nursing school. Yeah. They
Isn't that
came
amazing?
back, and they were caring for their community in that clinic that they made afterwards.
Isn't that amazing? So many lives you touched.
So it's amazing how just a small thing can impact so many people. And so I really do believe it's important to leave home and see what other parts of the world are like, and really see how other people live in different communities, and yeah, it's really amazing.
And to be able to do it like you didn't just visit as a tourist, you made a difference.
Yeah, I mean that was a real unique experience, and I really do feel like I learned a lot too, just about different communities, and and the same thing also. Yeah, when I went to Africa, I had a friend who I went to Yale with, and she was finishing the medical school, and I was finishing nursing school, and she was from her boyfriend was from a small African village, and we went out there, and just that chief welcomed us, and then he basically gave us his blessing that we could treat his community and their medical care, and people just start coming, and blood pressure and just simple things that you wouldn't even think, blood pressure.
Well, like you said, just Tylenol and saving lives.
Exactly.
Simple things that we take for granted that are so important for others.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that's
it
fantastic.
really is something.
And
Yeah.
so what's your time frame? Well, two questions. What's your time frame for the House Calls Mobile, and what do you need?
So I'm hopeful that by the end of this year, things will be off the ground, FDA approved, moving along. I feel like most of the R&D is done. We're probably going to start going to investors. I say that with a little trepidation, because the instant you get investors involved, it gets more complicated. People there's a lot more opinions and things you have to do, play by their rules if you want their money. So it gets a little more complicated as it goes. I know it has to happen though, because there's no way I can produce the volume of
that you need. You do have to have some help, but you also need to maintain some control too, because this is your vision. Understandable.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'll probably be up by you somewhere on Sand Hill road or whatever, wherever, and
Mhm.
talk to investors. But I've been told that the further along you can go, the better, and the more appealing your whole concept is. If you already have a working prototype, you already have small manufacturing batches being done, you already have FDA approval, patented, all these things make it a lot less of a risk for people to invest in you. So,
And all those things do take time in order to be done correctly and hit all the
Right.
marks.
exactly.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So, Courtney, where can people find you, or if they have questions, or give us your website?
Yeah, it's www.housecallsmobile. That's HousecallsMobile.com.
Wonderful. Courtney, this has been fascinating. And you have to keep us posted on the process. And then as things get closer to production, we'll have you back and we'll talk again.
Sounds good. Excited.
Thank you so much, Courtney, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. Today's show was sponsored by Seaside Solutions, my financial services company. As a business owner, it's easy to be pulled in many different directions, and often taking care of yourself plummets to the bottom of the list. For me, I find myself outside to reground. My time outdoors helps me manage my day more effectively and be more present for my clients. Through this, Discover Rising Tides was born. At Seaside Solutions, we truly believe that education is the foundation of financial wellness. Our primary focus is to provide guidance that is designed to help you achieve your long-term financial goals and visions. Working with a plan allows space for doing more things that you love, like being outside to make the inside better. If I can help you create or realign your plan, or if you would like to be added to my weekly newsletter, please let me know. This week's topic was 5 ways to set more achievable goals. Your referral means the big, beautiful world to me, and if I can help, please let me know. And thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.